Warning: the following program may contain material not be suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
Final depths unknown, our voice begins to rise, breaking through the noise with fire in its eyes. The spirit of adventure burning ever bright. Hold on tight, travelers, it's gonna be alright. Another week burning, halfway to the end. Bonus Overdrive Wednesday, let the tears descend. Bonus Overdrive Wednesday, night is here. Shatter the silence, conquer all your fear. Bonus Overdrive, the agents gonna scream. With Diego at the wheel, living out a dream.
It's time to find out with Diego. Let's go. Ooh, yeah.
On this episode of Bonus Overdrive Wednesday, our guest has been chilling readers for years. With 20 novels to his name, he's mastered the art of suspense and horror, crafting tales that linger long after you turn to final page. Growing up with a fascination for the dark and the fantastical, our guest's blend of influences from classic horror to medieval fantasy. We'll dive into these fascinating works and uncover the secrets behind their creative process. All this plus more. Please welcome first-time guest and new friend, author, Derek Barton. Derek, my friend, welcome to Bonus Overdrive Wednesday.
Well, thank you for having me on. I appreciate this opportunity.
Yeah, man, and when I learned about you, actually through Adam Began, he's actually our guy, our agent, and you were on the show a few times.
Mm-hmm.
I asked Adam, hey, let's get Derek on because I know he's got a new book coming out. He said, of course. So he helped set this up. So thank you, Adam, for that.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about this. You've written, 20 novels so far?
Yeah.
That's an amazing amount of books, man. Congratulations, first of all. I mean, you're a trooper. Now, when you first began in this writing journey that you're on, was it the plan to write so many of these books, or was it something that just happened naturally?
Well, it was more of a, I wanted to get through my first one. I wanted to prove I could write a novel for myself, and so I started. And it was more lighthearted at first, just kind of an effort, bored at work or something. I had some free time, so I would start dabbling on it. And then I realized that my story was kind of meandering. It was kind of wandering. I wanted to go, but I just didn't quite know how to get in that chapter, how to get from point A to point B to point C, So then I realized that I'm what they call a plotter, not a pantser type of writer. Some people can what they call write by the seat of their pants. I'm a plotter. I have to have an outline. I have to have everything. Everything is all figured out ahead of time. So I went back and I started my my bullet outline, and it ended up being 60 pages. So it was quite an extensive first outline. And when you think about it, it was really it was like my rough draft. So it went well. So then that took me my first book took me about 3 years to actually write, and then another 2 years to polish and get it formatted and get everything done. And then once I figured out the whole system, I had the whole process done. I'm like, well, I want to keep doing this. So then I did my second book, which only took a year to write and to edit and to format and then to publish. So I went from 5 years to a year, and now I try to do 2 a year if I can or more.
Well, let's go talk about your first two books or your first book. You might have said something about it as you were talking. What type of book was it? Because now you're really good with the horror. Was that your first thing you wanted to
Actually,
write?
fantasy was my first, yeah. So I did a fantasy novel. It was 300 pages. It's called Consequences Within Chaos, and I just really liked the main character, who was basically misunderstood, and he was a prince that had like a schizophrenic malady, where he would like basically he would lose touch with our reality and slip into another reality. And to him, this was all dreams. But as he finds out, him and the reader find out at the same time that these dreams are real, and he's slipping into another reality. And he doesn't know why. And so the whole story is revolving around his transition to becoming a leader, his transition from a young man to a good, strong leader for his people. So it's a kind of a coming of age story, but and then my third book actually is when I first started going into horror. So I wrote 2 books of fantasy, then I jumped into my horror side of writing, and I just, I grew up with 2 writers in mind. Stephen King, of course, was a great influence to me growing up in the 70s and 80s. And then R.A. Salvatore, who's a writer for fantasy, I really like a lot of his stuff and his characters. So that's how I would say that's why I have those 2 influences.
And during that time in the 70s and 80s, it was actually a pretty good time for fantasy and horror, even sci-fi. It's my favorite 2 decades when it comes to the television shows, movies, books, even comic books, especially cartoons. So which, aside from the author's part, what kind of movies and shows were you into that kind of help, I guess, influence you to be part of that world?
I would say The Shining is definitely one of my favorite horror films. Of course, later on, Lord of the Rings series, as far as fantasy. So I've always kind of like jumped between those 2. And a lot of my fantasy has horror elements in it. So, and it was some readers that actually said that they would like to see what I would do with horror when they realized that I had a lot of horror in my fantasy, and they would like to see what I could do with a horror book. So I took that to heart, and so now I jump back and forth. I wrote last year. I wrote 3 fantasy. So I try to, like I said, I go where I can. I jump back and forth. Try not to neglect either one too much.
So you kind of just weave in and out of each one, right?
Yep.
And I guess at this point it's not difficult for you, but how challenging can that be?
It becomes challenging when I get the urge to write fantasy, even when I'm in the middle of my horror story. So it's like, no, I've got to put that on the back burner. No, I can't think about that, that story yet. So, I definitely try to keep notes on things that I want to use in stories later. So I think it's important. I mean, it's not that I'm going to forget that stuff, but it's just a way to remind me, later on, oh yeah, I definitely wanted to do something with this idea for fantasy, that kind of thing.
And when you write the horror stories, any of that come from real life events, or is it mostly based on something that just comes in your mind?
Kind of both, actually. I've had nightmares that have actually influenced me and made me come up with an idea for either a short story or a novel. And then sometimes, music will also influence me I'd really like to see a character live out this lyric kind of thing, or something about this lyric made me think of this type of character, and I like to do a story around that. I would say that a lot of my stuff is character oriented, or centered around the character first. Consequences, my first book, was definitely that, where I thought of the character before I even thought of the story. And then I had to build a story around that character. With my latest book, it's also the same kind of thing. I thought it'd be really cool for this character. So my latest novel coming out is called Eclipse. It's about a teacher that everyone loves, calls him Gentle Giant Mike. He's a very tall man. And unbeknownst to everybody, he's always had a real dark inner personality, a real dark nature. Well, after he gets into a serious car accident, he sustains some brain damage from the accident, and this just unleashes everything, and then there's no turning back.
With that, now the cover is very,
Yeah.
very scary, kind of gory,
Yeah,
and
but it's probably one of my darkest writings so far. With I think it was somebody who was reading my novel Elude. They said they really enjoyed it up to the part where it became somewhat was supernatural, and they said that was they kind of felt like that was a cop out, that I should have kept it all true crime. And but to my credit, I did have on the novel horror suspense. So I mean, I never said it was a true story, but I did take that to heart, that it would be kind of interesting to see if I could write a horror story that does not revolve around horror elements like the occult or supernatural. So that's what this is. This is more of a this is definitely this could happen, in other words.
God. So it's interesting that you mentioned it. I was having a conversation with somebody the other day about horror movies, and to me, some of the best horror movies have really nothing to do with what we call paranormal or vampires, zombies. Is actually some slasher ones.
Yeah.
And to me, something that could possibly happen in real life, not that paranormal could not, maybe zombies could down the road, but something that, somebody coming to your house and going around your house with a knife or something trying to chase you, that would scare the shit out of me.
Yeah, kind of like that's how I kind of looked at what's a movie called Strangers, where it's a home
let's
invasion.
get out of here with that. Yeah. Great movie.
Yeah, it's a really intense psychological thriller. That's kind of what I was going for. Is this latest one's on the serial killer. So Gentle Giant Mike goes away and he unleashes himself on Chicago.
Yeah, and I think I was talking in the spirit of what we were just talking about. I think movies like You're Next and Everybody Dies. Have you ever seen those two?
Yes, I have.
Oh my word! Yeah, and that's kind of like where my interest lays. But I'll take a good supernatural horror movie anytime. But sometimes there's just something about these types of movies that, even like the other ones that you're watching this, you hear a little something on the outside, a branch break or a little noise outside. You're like, oh, maybe I'm next. You start looking through the window. Oh, it's nothing. It's the neighbor. But yeah, that's how you know a movie's well made, when it gives you the creeps like that.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
talking about your cover. So was it your idea as a concept of that cover, or who made the cover?
Yeah, I I wanted to kind of hint to the reader, hey, this is definitely what you can anticipate. This one's a darker novel. It's more gore than I'm usually using. And so the cover is of one of his victims, where he uses a blowtorch on the victim.
All right.
I don't want to give away too much, but but it definitely, like I said, the basis for the cover is to let the reader know this is not going to be a very pleasant journey, so to speak. Be thrilling, but it may be, if you're weak of stomach, you may want to go for something else.
Well, the warning is out there. It's PG-13 and over. And with coming up with the scenes or the storylines behind Eclipse.
Mhm.
And one has to go to a very dark place in order to, I want to say the word invent, or at least describe different types of ways when somebody murders a victim, kills a victim. How do you do that?
You know, I find that a lot of times I just let the story unfold. As far as I know where I want to get in that chapter and what I want to do, but sometimes my characters will act out and do stuff that I wasn't anticipating at that moment, and it'll go off my outline. So then I have to change it. So something similar, I can't really go into detail on that, happens in Eclipse, where a character does something. He does something very dark that I was not, I had not written in. So, and it's kind of funny because I sat back after I wrote that, and I'm like, okay, I'm a little worried about myself. That creeped me out. But then the next day, I met with my writing group, which I host, and it was funny. One of the ladies that had come into the group, she said, before we get started, I have a textbook here from my daughter who's switching her major. She's switching from forensic science into something else. So I have this book here. It's called Homicidal Detective Instructions and Procedures. I'm like, oh, well, I'll take that. And when I opened the book, it shocked me because I wasn't expecting it, but there were pages and pages of photos of actual victims. And versus a normal, like you would expect somebody who's into horror would be like, oh, this is really cool. You know, it actually turned my stomach, made me shut the book immediately. So I thought, well, I guess I am still normal. I still get, shocked by this kind of stuff.
Hey,
So,
you're not too jaded quite yet.
nope. So, but yeah, it was definitely something I can use. Definitely something that I'm gonna read, but I have to read in doses. It gets to me a little bit.
And I could definitely understand that. And we're gonna get back to.
I think that's also why I do the fantasy. After a while, I have to jump back into fantasy just to get my.
Yeah, this is kind of where I was gonna go, because we'll get back to Eclipse in a moment. Because with 20 novels, 20 books under your belt right now, you have a lot of characters.
Yes.
It takes a lot of time, and I use not a term I created, of course, but world building can be very difficult. I'm pretty sure. So, with talking about coming up with characters, are there any standout characters have you written about that stand out to you the most, or maybe a few that you're more attached to than others?
Yeah, I would say so. It's funny. With my second novel, which was a fantasy called The Bleeding Crown, I was working with a very talented voice actress, and she wrote me that. She says, do you realize you have 30 some different added new voices to this book than you had to the prior book? So it was like, basically she had to come up with ways to do 50 some voices. So yeah, it takes a lot when you're doing fantasy, especially with the world building. Last year, like I said, I worked really hard on some fantasy to complete my series. And one of the books I was working on, there was a huge battle going to be taking place. And it was so big that I spent a lot of time outlining and even, used a great big whiteboard to kind of choreograph and plan who's coming in when, where, that kind of thing. It's more like a dance than it is battle when you're writing it, because you want to make sure that everybody who's involved in the battle gets some kind of spotlight, but at the same time, you don't want to be too choppy to where you're jumping all over the place and confusing the reader. So I was really proud of that scene when it was finally done, but it was like 6,000 word scene, 6,000 word battle. So I was very proud of the way it finally came about, and I was able to finish the novel. But yeah, that was in that battle, especially, there were quite a few characters that I really loved that I had to do away with. not everybody's going to live. Not everybody's going to survive a battle. And some of them, I made sure that they went out in style. One of the, like I said earlier, music also has a big influence on my writing. And there's a song by Slipknot called "Scars," and basically the way the lyrics are is, I got this scar from doing this, I got this scar from that. So I wanted a character who was a battle-worn, veteran who's covered in scars, but he was still humble and still willing to be that public servant and hero. So his name was Scars, and it worked out really well. He was one of my favorite characters in the book.
And now, well, you kind of add a little bit of a layer to this with musical influences. So, are you more of a hard rock and metal fan, or does it matter?
Yep, I would say I'm definitely heavy metal. I also lean a little bit to the dubstep and techno, but mostly heavy metal.
Same thing here, and I don't venture too much out of my comfort zone. You know what I've been getting a lot into is, for some reason, there's this new, whatever's old is new again. But a lot of people are really digging into the synth wave, 80s synth wave, and adding metal elements to it. I don't know if you've been watching or listening to these things, but very well made. And I'll send you the links, man. I think you'll really like it.
Yeah, that sounds interesting. So definitely let me give it a shot.
Yeah, and in fact, it kind of helped me out with some ideas for this show. So you never know where or when you'll see something that'll give you a little bit of a little bit of an influence or a little something to change things up, and then you kind of build on that without, of course, taking too much away from the original source. But in going to Eclipse, because this Eclipse Part 1, correct?
Correct.
So are you going to take a break in between 1 and 2 and slip a fantasy one in there? Or what are you going to do?
No, what I want to do is so my first 2 series that I did with horror, Elude and then Evade, I broke them down in 3 books each. And then last year I combined all of Elude into one full large novel. And I'm doing that presently with Evade to make it a large novel. So I decided to go ahead and just skip that and make Eclipse a full-length novel, a very large novel. So I'm in the process of writing Part 2 now, but I've outlined and gotten everything set up for Part 2 and 3. So I hope to have the whole novel out back probably March or April next year. So that's my goal. Right now I got this as Part 1, and I've got it set up to where it'll be a collectible that I'm going to be releasing it, and after October 3rd. I got a show that I'm going to be doing October 3rd, and that's where I've got these special prints that people can buy. And it's only Part 1, but it's a good intro. Trust me.
Awesome, and I know because you're going to be doing a lot of these events coming up, and 2026 is right around the corner. You're talking about releasing Part 2. I mean, I don't know how you do it when you find the time, but going back to the topic of music, if you were to have a soundtrack to the story in Eclipse, you could pick out a few bands that would be on that soundtrack. Who would you pick?
Well, Godsmack is definitely my favorite band. Disturbed, Five Finger Death Punch, maybe Avenged Sevenfold. So, I like bands that offer unique sounds that don't just sound like the run of the mill. Chevelle would definitely be one that I would add to that. So,
is that currently what you have on your iPod when you drive to work?
Pretty much.
Yeah, I understand that. I have my whole thing going on when I listen to music, but definitely in the gym, I go a little heavier.
I listen to heavy metal or harder stuff when I'm writing at night. I have the lights off, the computer on, but I'll have heavy metal playing a little bit in the background. When I write my fantasy, I switch it up. I play it like epic music, or soundtracks that I really like.
That makes sense though, and
Yep. Set the
it's gotta
mood.
get you, set the mood. It's gotta get you in the mood for sure. And now, something I always like to ask experienced authors, and everybody has their own strategy on how to write a book. And you were telling us that earlier on the episode. If you have any words of advice to a first-time author, and with many different writing styles out there, what kind of tips and helpful information would you give somebody who's just starting to write?
Well, you definitely want to find out what type of writer you are. Are you more comfortable with just allowing this story to unfold on the screen in front of you, or do you need that direction? And that's why for me, I wasn't successful at all until I learned that I need to outline, because I never finished a story. I never really did much up until I started outlining for this book, and I was 40 years old. My first book came out in 2016. So, I've been lucky. I've been able to get quite a collection of stories out there since then. But, I would definitely find out what type of writer you are, and then develop what they call a writing ritual or routine. Some people kind of get a little carried away with it, in my opinion, but they have candles, or they have their specific writer mug, or they've got to only write in one place at one time. To me, I got to be a little more flexible with that. I try to write either at home on my days off, especially, or if I have to, I'll write on my phone if I got an opportunity. So, I would definitely say that, especially nowadays with the internet, this is the easiest and greatest time to be a writer, because there's so much out there that you don't have to actually, like, I don't need to sit in a car ride along with a officer in Philadelphia to know what Philadelphia is like. I was able to do so much research and learn about the city and use it for my background that I've actually had people ask me, how long did you live in Philadelphia? I've never even been to Philadelphia. So, right now, the internet is definitely your best friend. Use it. That also means go on YouTube, go on Book Talk, as far as TikTok's Book Talk, and learn from the people that put things out there. There's a lot of advice out there. There's a lot of things, a lot of instrumental videos out there that really help you. I do that too with my own blog. I try to put some self-publishing tips on there just to help other writers, avoid some of the mistakes I made, or learn, what works for me may work for them.
And yeah, so now also with the advantage now, a lot of people can do self-publishing and not go to a publishing house. Not that I would not recommend to do that either, but I think that the doors are definitely open for new authors.
Yes. And honestly, I got tired of waiting for my life to begin. So I stopped with the query letters and proceeded with the indie market, because it just felt like eventually most of the work that they're going to ask me to do, I'm going to do anyway. And this way I don't give up the rights to my story. Most traditional markets or traditional publishers want you to already have an established market, an established fan base. And so the only way you're going to be doing that is by publishing, and if you can't get them to publish you ahead of time, it's like a vicious circle. So I decided that I'm not going to wait for my life anymore. I'm just going to take it and do it. And, I've been lucky that I've been able to develop a small fan base, and every day it gets further out there.
Awesome. And now, for the listeners of Bonus Overdrive Wednesday that want to learn more about your books, where to get them, and more information about you and where you're going to be for the rest of 2025 and in 2026, where can they go find out?
Okay. Well, I do have my website. It's called authorderekbarton.blog. So it's pretty simple. It's on WordPress. So on there, I tried to put out a lot of my fresh content, like my rough drafts, before they're even published. So you'll like see the beginnings of my novels on there, or like I said, I'll do blogs on books I've read, or I'll do blogs on movies I like, or I'll do blogs about, hey, this is what I did to get my book published, and what it took as far as getting an editor or not getting an editor, that kind of thing like that. As far as where you're going to see me, I will be in October here in Arizona at the Tempe Horror Fest 2025. It's going to be a big show, so I'm really looking forward to it. I would say it's probably the biggest show I've done so far as a book signing. And so I've got 25 copies of Eclipse, and I'm going to be selling there, the special collector edition, and they'll be signed, and I'll hand those out. So to anybody who comes by. So there's going to be stars from the series From, which is really good, creepy horror story series. It's on, I believe, MGM Grand. Have you heard of that one?
Not yet.
It's from the producers that wrote, same people that wrote Lost. So, but definitely darker than what Lost was, even though Lost got pretty dark in sometimes.
Just when you couldn't get darker, they got even darker, my friend.
Yep.
I really appreciate you being on Bonus Overdrive Wednesday, and when Eclipse Part 2 comes out, please come back on the show. We'll talk about it, and we'll talk more horror, my friend.
Okay, well, thank you, and I really appreciate this opportunity to come on here, and it's a pleasure meeting you.
Pleasure meeting you, my friend.
All content on this broadcast is a property of Diego the Podcaster and is served directly from our servers with no modification, redirects, or rehosting. All celebrity impersonators are paid performers. The impersonated celebrities do not endorse or promote any views or opinions expressed by our guests, Diego the Podcaster, or Bonus Overdrive Wednesday. The information shared on Bonus Overdrive Wednesday is provided on an as-is basis, with no guarantees of completeness, accuracy, usefulness, or timeliness.